weekly roundup of the top local stories. I am Minha Maroof, your host for the evening. Stay tuned. President Dr. Mohammad Moizu ratifies the 16th Amendment to the Decentralization Act. The bill was passed during the 22nd sitting of the second session of the 2025 parliamentary term on 6 August 2025. The amendment introduces several key changes aimed at strengthening the decentralized governance system. Its primary objectives are to define the scope of business activities conducted by local authority companies established by councils, review certain principles governing the provision of state grants to councils, and establish procedures for significant financial decisions in the final year of a council's term. The amendment stipulates that business activities undertaken by local authority companies must meet specified conditions, with any activities found to be in conflict with the law required to cease within 90 days of the amendment coming into force. It also introduces a provision prohibiting councils from charging rent for land or buildings allocated to various parties for the provision of essential public services. Furthermore, the amendment stipulates that the appointment of staff, leasing of land, lagoons and reef areas within the council's jurisdiction, and the commencement of a new development project not included in the council's development plan may only be carried out in accordance with guidelines set by the Ministry of Finance and the local government authority if a council's term will end within 365 days or less. Following ratification, the amendment has been published in the Government Gazette and has now come into effect. President Dr. Mohammad Moizu emphasized that these changes are an important step towards further strengthening and advancing the decentralized system in the Maldives. Official fiscal figures show government revenue and grants have increased by 8.2%, with expenditure down by 16.7% in the first 29 weeks of the year compared to the same period last year. According to the Ministry of Finance and Planning's weekly fiscal development report, state revenue was recorded at 1.54 billion from 1st January to 7th August, an 8.2% increase from the 1.42 billion over the same period last year. The figures showed that tax revenue accounted for the bulk of the year's total revenue, thus far followed by non-tax revenue. The government has collected $1.2 billion in taxes and $324.3 million so far this year. The government posted $1.4 billion in total expenditure as of last week, down 16.7% from the same period last year. The government's recurrent expenditure declined by 1.1%, while capital expenditure plunged 60.4%. Amid the ongoing austerity measures, 56.9% of recurrent expenditure was recorded as administrative expenses, down 5.4% from the same period last year. Office supplies reduced by 17.8%, while repairs and maintenance costs declined 19.9%, along with expenditure on transportation by 5.3%, and subsidy costs decreased by 9.1% compared to the previous year, the figures showed. As of last week, the total capital expenditure was at 181.6 million, majority of which was on key infrastructure assets like road construction, bridges and airport development. This is 21.2% of the total budget approved by the Parliament for this year. Maldives, in unity with a coalition of Arab and Muslim nations, condemned statements made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu regarding his vision for a Greater Israel. The Greater Israel concept, supported by ultra-nationalist Israelis, is understood to refer to an expansionist vision that lays claim to the occupied West Bank, Gaza, parts of Lebanon, Syria, Egypt and Jordan. In a joint statement, Maldives, along with 30 Arab and Islamic foreign ministers and the Secretaries General of the League of Arab States, the OIC and the GCC, condemned the so-called vision of Greater Israel. The statement emphasizes that this rhetoric violates international law and the UN Charter, undermining the Palestinian people's inalienable rights to self-determination and to establish an independent, sovereign state on their own land, based on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. It calls for the immediate cessation of all Israeli settlement activities, full humanitarian access to Gaza, the lifting of the blockade, and urgent measures to ensure regional peace, security and stability. Following the statement, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Abdullah Khalil, in a post on X, reaffirmed Maldives' steadfast support for Palestine and its commitment to a just, comprehensive and lasting peace in the region. The joint statement came a day after hundreds of people gathered in the capital Male, echoing calls for an independent state of Palestine to end the genocide in Gaza. People of all ages, carrying placards and banners to voice their support for Palestine, gathered at Mafanu turf grounds in the west of Male, called on the international community. The movement, part of the Global Summit Flotilla, campaigning to break the illegal siege on Gaza by sea, open a humanitarian corridor and end the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people, was mirrored in around 50 islands across the Maldives. For 18 months, the Maldives has consistently ranked among the most vocal nations on the Palestinian issue, especially the genocide in Gaza, issuing a substantial number of statements across international forums. The government has backed its rhetoric with policy action, actively participating in 3 legal proceedings against Israel at the International Court of Justice (ICJ), while also imposing an official ban on entry for individuals holding Israeli passports, an unprecedented move underscoring its firm stance. The Maldives' National Tourism Board, Visit Maldives Corporation (VMC), launches a strategic marketing initiative aimed at strengthening its position within the Indian outbound travel market. The campaign, titled From Tiranga to Turquoise, sets an ambitious target of welcoming 200,000 Indian visitors in 2025, supported by expanded aviation infrastructure and a multi-channel promotional strategy.
Symbolically, the campaign traces a journey from the colors of India's national flag to the turquoise waters and white sand beaches that define the Maldivian islands. This thematic framing coincides with a period of sustained growth in Indian arrivals, which have increased by more than 130% compared to 2017 and 2018 levels. In 2023, Indian visitor numbers reached a record 209,193. By mid-August 2025, over half of the current year's target had already been achieved. The campaign's strategic intent was outlined by Ibrahim Shuri, Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Visit Maldives. He said that the Maldives aspires to become the preferred destination for a range of Indian traveler segments, including honeymooners, families, corporate groups, and potential film tourism. To reach these audiences, the campaign employs a broad spectrum of promotional activities. Collaborations with micro and macro social media influencers are complemented by media familiarization trips designed to showcase Maldivian hospitality. Coverage in India's leading newspapers through advertorials and feature stories further amplifies the message. A series of Tri-City roadshows is also planned, bringing together airlines, media representatives, and travel trade partners. Momentum from early efforts has already translated into significant visibility. In February, VMC hosted a Maldivian night at the Four Seasons Hotel in Mumbai, attended by more than 100 high-profile guests, including celebrities and over 20 influencers. The event positioned the Maldives as both a luxury and family-friendly destination, leveraging a combined social media reach exceeding 200 million. The newly inaugurated passenger terminal at Villana International Airport has increased annual capacity to 7 million tourists, streamlining passenger flow and enhancing the overall travel experience. Later this year, the opening of Hanimadu International Airport is expected to improve direct connectivity from India, offering more convenient access to northern atolls.
Parliament passes the legislative amendment to the National Payment System Act, introducing sweeping reforms intended to curtail unauthorized financial transactions and strengthen the oversight responsibilities of the nation's central bank.
The nominations were submitted in accordance with constitutional procedure and have been referred to the Committee on Independent Institutions for detailed examination. This follows the impending conclusion of 5-year terms for Commission President Mohammad Nasih and members Muhammad Farshat and Fatimat Sharif, all of whom are set to vacate office on the 3rd of September. Under the framework governing independent institutions, the President is required to propose replacements when a member's term expires. In this instance, President Muiz has nominated 6 individuals for 3 available seats on the Civil Service Commission. The candidates will be reviewed sequentially in the order submitted by the President. The nominees are Muhammad Nasih, Dr. Hussein Faiz, Dr. Diba Musa, Baduriya Musa, Dr. Fatimat Muna, and Aminat Kulthum. The Speaker of Parliament has since referred the list to the committee, which is tasked with conducting a comprehensive evaluation of each nominee's credentials and suitability. Upon completion of the review, the proposed appointments must be endorsed by a vote on the Parliament floor before the President may proceed with formal designation. The Civil Service Commission is constituted as a 5-member body, with each member serving a term of 5 years. Its current composition includes President Mohammad Nasih, Vice President Mohammad Mujtaz, and members Muhammad Farshat and Fatimat Sharif and Fatimat Habiba. The incoming appointments will fill the seats vacated by Nasih, Farshat, and Sharif.
Government reintroduces a bill to Parliament proposing the consolidation of the country's 2 principal media regulatory bodies in a single commission, in a renewed effort to overhaul the national framework for press oversight. The legislation, formally titled the Maldives Media and Broadcasting Regulation Bill, proposes the merger of the Maldives Media Council and the Maldives Broadcasting Commission under a unified authority.
The measure was submitted to Parliament by Abdul Hanan Abu Bakr, Member of Parliament for Tuladu, who previously sponsored a similar initiative known as the Media and Broadcast Commission Bill. That earlier version was withdrawn, but the current proposal reflects a sustained legislative interest in streamlining regulatory functions and reinforcing ethical standards across the media sector. According to its stated objectives, the bill is intended to advance press freedom, ensure its long-term viability, and address the spread of false information. It also seeks to establish formal guidelines for media outlets and journalists, enabling the responsible exercise of constitutionally protected rights. Under the proposed framework, a new body, the Maldives Media and Broadcasting Commission, would be established to assume the responsibilities of the 2 existing entities. In doing so, the legislation would repeal the laws governing the Maldives Media Council and print media, including newspapers and magazines. 3 would be appointed by the President, subject to parliamentary approval, while 4 would be elected by media organizations. The President of the Commission would be nominated by the Head of State, again with the consent of Parliament. The Vice President would be selected internally by the Commission's members. Elections for the media-elected members would be administered by the Elections Commission of Maldives. Eligibility is limited to registered news outlets, broadcasters, or journalists affiliated with such entities, provided they have maintained registration for a minimum of 5 years. For broadcasters, the Commission would be authorized to issue rectification orders in response to violations. Repeated infractions could result in fines of up to 10% of the broadcaster's revenue from the preceding fiscal year. In cases of persistent non-compliance, the Commission would be empowered to petition the courts for the revocation of broadcasting licenses. For print media, including newspapers and magazines, repeated ethical breaches could incur fines ranging from $324.27 to $6,485.15. The Commission would also have the authority to suspend a publication's registration pending resolution of a case. Continued violations could prompt the Commission to seek cancellation of registration through judicial channels. Additionally, failure to rectify an issue within the time frame specified by the Commission could result in fines between $324.27 and $1,621.29. The bill is currently under parliamentary review.
The government has formally introduced legislation that would allow state employees to remain in public service until the age of 75, marking a significant departure from existing retirement norms and signaling a broader effort to retain institutional expertise within the civil service.
The proposed re-employment bill submitted to Parliament by Hanan Muhammad Rashid, member of Guraidu, sets out a legal framework for the continued employment of individuals aged 65 to 75. It defines eligibility criteria, procedural requirements, and operational guidelines for re-engaging both current and former state employees under a renewable annual contract system. Re-employment would be made available to current state employees who wish to extend their service beyond the age of 65. The bill also provides for the re-engagement of individuals who retired upon reaching the pensionable age, provided their departure occurred within 7 years prior to the law's enactment. Employment under this framework would be governed by annually renewable agreements. Eligible individuals may be reinstated to their previous roles or assigned to equivalent positions within the state apparatus, subject to institutional requirements and administrative discretion. In terms of compensation, the bill stipulates that salaries and benefits for re-employment personnel shall be determined by the National Pay Commission. While those re-engaged under this scheme would not receive the basic pension typically awarded at age 65, they would remain entitled to other pension funds as provided under the Pension Act. The legislation outlines specific timelines for application. Current employees intending to continue service must submit their re-employment request no later than 6 months prior to their 65th birthday. Retired individuals eligible under the bill must apply within 4 months of the law's enactment. Certain categories of public servants are explicitly excluded from the bill's scope. These include members of the armed forces, police officers, judges, and individuals appointed under the Constitution or other statutory instruments. The re-employment bill has been referred to the relevant parliamentary committee for further examination, making the next phase in its legislative trajectory.
The Prosecutor General, PG Abbas Sharif, says the new Prevention of Gang and Other Serious Offences Act, set to come into force next month, will provide a major boost to increasing public trust and confidence in the justice system.
While previous legislation targeting gang activity, intimidation, and the possession of dangerous weapons has been in place since 2010, it has not produced effective results. The new law will come into effect on the 25th of August following its ratification in May, addresses these gaps, and provides the stronger response the public has long called for. Speaking during the media briefing session on the new law, the PG said law enforcement agencies will have the ability to declare a criminal group as a gang through the High Court and crack down on their criminal activities. However, he admitted that prosecutors along with law enforcement agencies need to put in a lot of effort to gather enough evidence to get the First Appellate Court to sign off on such classifications. Abbas said once the classification is made, authorities will have the power to make the information public through the government gazette. The chief prosecutor expressed confidence that the new law will lead to increased public trust in the justice system with harsher penalties for serious and organized crime, adding that it also closes the door on clemency or presidential pardons for serious and violent crimes. The new statute formally defines offenses related to gang activity and organized crime, introducing strict penalties while significantly broadening law enforcement authority. It establishes monitoring mechanisms for high-risk individuals and concludes provisions to prevent the recruitment of minors into criminal organizations. Structuring its approach around prevention and enforcement, the law aims to dismantle entrenched networks and disrupt their operations. Under its provisions, law enforcement agencies are tasked with identifying gangs and individuals affiliated with them, a step intended to weaken criminal networks and limit their ability to operate. The legislation also authorizes the seizure of illicit assets linked to organized crime, criminalizing financial support for such groups. Law enforcement agencies have been granted expanded powers to conduct controlled deliveries and covert operations aimed at dismantling organized crime syndicates. The law explicitly criminalizes recruitment into organized crime with stiff penalties for those responsible.
The Parliament adjourns its second legislative session, concluding a period defined by sustained debate, committee diligence, and the passage of key bills. The recess follows weeks of concentrated activity across both plenary and committee levels.
The session comprised 27 sittings, totaling 46 hours of deliberation within the chamber. According to data released by the Parliamentary Secretariat, alongside these plenary proceedings, parliamentary committees convened 127 times, with meetings extending to a cumulative 91 hours and 29 minutes. Legislative progress was made on 24 bills that had previously remained pending, with 7 successfully enacted. Among the measures finalized were amendments to the Thalassemia Control Act, the Decentralization Act, and the Water and Sewerage Act. Parliament also passed the Maldives Intellectual Property Office Bill, the Insurance Bill, and amendments to the National Payment System Act. Of the 11 motions introduced by the government, 8 were concluded. 5 motions submitted by the Speaker of Parliament resulted in 2 completions, while 1 motion tabled by lawmakers was finalized. Work also progressed on 2 reports concerning miscellaneous matters. Emergency motions received full attention, with all 6 submitted motions resolved. Of 2 motions concerning parliamentary privileges, 1 was brought to conclusion. Parliamentarians submitted 77 questions directed to cabinet ministers. However, only 8 were addressed before the session closed. With the second session now concluded, Parliament is scheduled to reconvene in October for its 3rd and final sitting of the year, expected to conclude by late November.
The government intensifies its efforts to document migrant workers residing within the country, with biometric data for 174,152 migrant workers now recorded in a centralized national database. The campaign, formally titled Operation Kurangi, is being led by the Ministry of Homeland Security and Technology and forms a cornerstone of the administration's strategy to address undocumented labor. Initiated on 2nd May 2024, the operation has targeted expatriate populations across a range of strategic locations, including the capital region of Male, designated industrial zones, and resort properties. The ministry has also implemented mechanisms to extend data collection to migrant communities across the country's inhabited islands and atolls. Biometric records compiled under the initiative include 10 fingerprint scans and facial photographs, enabling identity verification through facial recognition technology. Ministry sources report that the first phase of the operation is nearing completion, with the second phase already underway. According to government authorities, the operation is designed to provide a durable solution to the issue of undocumented migrant residency. The initiative seeks to determine whether foreign nationals are employed in accordance with Maldivian labor laws and immigration regulations, thereby reinforcing legal compliance across the workforce. The second phase of the operation is structured to offer legally employed individuals an opportunity to regularize their status. In addition to addressing the circumstances of current residents, this phase aims to strengthen the regulatory infrastructure governing the entry and employment of migrant workers, enhancing institutional oversight and procedural integrity. As part of its enforcement strategy, the ministry has begun restricting access to its systems for employers who have failed to update biometric records for their foreign employees. The ministry said, to date, 2,498 employers have been blocked due to non-compliance, according to official figures. The Homeland Security Ministry has affirmed its commitment to resolving the challenges posed by undocumented migrant labor. Operation Kurangi, along with its associated activities, is expected to culminate in a comprehensive resolution by April 2027. President Dr. Mohammad Muizzu returns to the capital following a multi-island tour of Alif Alif Atoll, where he met with local communities to assess development priorities and reinforce his administration's commitment to inclusive governance. Over the past 3 days, the president visited Thoddu, Rastu, Ukuras, Mathiveri, Boduforudu, Feritu, Maros, and Himandu. Accompanied by a ministerial delegation and senior officials from state-owned enterprises, he held consultations with island councils, women's development committees, and residents, focusing on the alignment of national initiatives with local needs. Among the key outcomes of the visit was the announcement of Bank of Maldives ATM services for all inhabited islands in the atoll. The measure is expected to improve financial accessibility and streamline banking operations for remote communities. The President also officiated the commencement of police station construction in Malos, Himandu, Feridu and Thoddu, marking a significant expansion of public safety infrastructure. Project launches across multiple sectors were formalized during the tour, with the President presiding over the signing of several agreements. In his meetings with island residents, he outlined the implementation timeline for initiatives scheduled in 2025 and the following year, providing clarity on the government's long-term development agenda. Administrative decisions were also announced, including the formal designation of Mafaru Lagoon as part of Feridu. The move is intended to enhance jurisdictional coherence and resource management. President Moise reaffirmed his commitment to preserving and developing Madivaru Finaru for the benefit of Rastu residents and underscored the strategic importance of the airport under construction in Mathiveri, noting its potential to serve both the atoll and the broader national tourism sector. The visit also included a sports engagement component, with the President inaugurating the Thoddu Masters table tennis tournament. The event brought together national, regional and international champions, reflecting the administration's support for sport and community cohesion. Throughout the tour, President Moise reiterated that direct engagement with citizens, attentiveness to grassroots concerns, and collaborative governance remain central to his administration's policy framework. The President expressed the government's desire to also promote local tourism and reiterated the government's commitment towards it. However, he emphasized that there are principles that business operators must uphold and adhere to, including avoiding practices prohibited in Islam and that which are not deemed appropriate for the community. He advised businesses to operate within the bounds of Islamic principles and the laws of the Maldives, urging them to seek prosperity through means consistent with faith and local values. The President also shared a note he had received from a child during his visit to Ukolas, which raised concerns about activities unfamiliar to the community and its religion. The President warned that there is no benefit of infrastructural development without the cultivation of the mind and spirit. He pledged that the government would continue to support the sector while ensuring it aligns with Islamic tenets. The visit served not only as an operational review, but as a reaffirmation of the government's commitment to equitable development across the country. The President was accompanied by several ministers and senior officials from various government bodies. That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching 168 Hours. See you next time.